All right. Um, I'm Eduardo Ortiz Frau, and this is my
And I'm Martin Kvale.
and he's mine. So yeah, we're just two sound designers in the industry. We mostly focus on just like indie games, and we're here. I don't know. Last year we talked about it would be cool to do a panel together and just talk about our work, and here we are. So I'll just start by introducing myself a little bit more. So okay. Oh wait, I need to go back. How do you go back? There. And all right. So I mean, I've been doing sound for a very long time, but I used to be kind of like in the music industry, and I did a bit of short films before, like ever since 2004. But in 2011, I came to Austin and I discovered video games pretty much because I was never really a gamer when I kind of like was growing up. I immediately fell in love with what was going on in
There you
this
go.
there we go. Sorry. I immediately fell in love with what was going on in this industry. I became very passionate and I started working with this guy who's sitting in the audience called Robin Arnott. And he like taught me kind of like the first things about sound design for video games, and then after that I kind of like just kept going. But we did Stanley Parable together. I did kind of like the environmental work in that game, and he did everything else. And that was a pretty lucky break because we certainly didn't know it was going to turn into this huge success. And this being kind of like my first proper game, that's pretty lucky for me. I kind of launched my career. So after that, I did Apotheon, which Robin started, and then he was just like too busy to keep going. So I ended up just doing most of it. And then I did Neverending Nightmares, which was like a really cool horror project. And then Cryptarch, which was here in Fantastic Arcade, I think 2016, which I guess that makes it last year. So Gorogoa, which also was here at some point or another. Megakure, who's still in the process of being made. Edith Finch, that just came out. I work with two other sound designers on this. And everything that came out earlier this year. And I feel like this talk is pretty much only going to be about everything because I feel like I have a lot to say about this game.
Worth noting that Eduardo's going to be talking about everything, and I'm going to be talking about everything else. So we're going to cover most things, I think.
Yeah, after this, you should know a lot of things about the world, if not everything. So, alright, so I guess I'll just, honestly, it'll be like a relaxed talk. I'll just kind of like play the game and just do a commentary over it and kind of like talk about the things that I find interesting about this game when it comes to the sound specifically. Okay, so everything is pretty much the hardest game that I've ever worked on. And it's hard on many, many levels. It was kind of like very different from every other game that I had worked on. And, one of the first things that made it really hard was just like the huge amount of content. And kind of like when David OReilly approached me to do this type of, to do this project, I was like, yeah, I think I can do that in 3 months. Should be fine. And then that turned into a 15-month ordeal. So I was not prepared. And honestly, I don't think they were prepared either because it's like it kept, the deadline kept moving. And I mean, but that happens a lot with indie games. So that's not unique. But this game is, it's not only the amount of things that are in the game, it's the fact that there are so many scales and perspectives to the world, which means that I had to kind of like design a few video games in one in terms of aesthetics. Usually, you have a specific aesthetic to a world, and you figure out when you're starting out, kind of like the project, what you're gonna do, and then you kind of like you do it, right? But with this game, and kind of like showing, it takes you through all these like perspectives and scales. It means that every scale has to sound different and has its own aesthetic. So that was a big challenge, like, all right, what does galaxies sound like? This is like a star cluster, right? And this is, all right, twinkly, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm trying to reach one of the beautiful sounding galaxies. Come on. So, this whole level, which is the galaxy level scale, it was done using specific tools that aren't really used in the other levels, like specific synths, right? And with a specific set of ideas in mind. Then we go to the collapse level, which is kind of like string theory. You have a different set of tools that I'm using to capture like a different aesthetic, and one of the main one being this little synth right here, the OP1, which I got introduced to last year at FA, and it was by this guy. Like he made an award-winning audio for the game Gonner, and he used that. That was the kind of like the main thing he used, and he was just showing me like what he was doing, and I was very impressed. So, kind of like being the impulsive buyer that I am, I just went ahead and bought it, and I was like, perfect, I'll use it for this area of the game. And I'll show a little bit about how I kind of like went around playing with the synth and making these sounds. But let's see. There's a lot of like little different sounds that I did for this. I'm gonna show you real fast as I play like. So something curious about this level, like I made all those sounds to go with this music that is about to play, which is in a certain key, and that kind of like it worked out, and it didn't work out in a way because we had not decided to, like before, all the different levels were gonna have their own music, and they were not gonna overlap. Once you left the level, like you would not hear that music again until you came back to it, right? But then we decided to overlap the music. So now, even though the sounds work, it's kind of like I would redo them a bit different so that they're not on the same scale, because we're no longer adhering to a specific track anymore. But anyways, moving on. So, when we enter the galaxy, the particle level, it's got its own aesthetic and its own set of rules to the world, right? And this was done with other synthesizers and other tools. You're gonna hear a bit more of those specific sounds, kind of like. kind of like how that world sounds. All right, let's move up in the world. All right, so we're talking about the challenges of this game. Like one thing that made it very unique was the fact. Usually, when you go through development, you make a cool sound, you make something nice, and you feel like a little victory. You're like, oh, I did that. I did a gun. I did, I don't know, a spacecraft, whatever. The point is, like, with this game, that's not how it worked. It was like 6 months till I really got a feeling of, this is sounding good. Because, if I make a sound for like a little acorn, that's not it. That's just the music. It's kind of like a nice sound, but it isn't like a super. I don't know. I don't feel like victory from doing that. So it wasn't until everything started coming together, like long into the process, that I finally started getting that sense of like, oh, okay, this is coming together. I like it. And that was a real challenge because it means that I had to push on through without getting that sense of victory that that takes you through development. Like every week, every month, every couple of days, you just get that sense of victory, right? Another thing that made it really hard is that change of perspectives, because usually in a game you have a specific perspective, right? It doesn't change. And when it comes to tech in audio, you kind of like you make a certain set of rules and then they don't change. But anyways, I'm gonna keep going. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous, guys. Are you enjoying this? Yes. All right. Good. Thank you for that reinforcement. All right. So other cool things about the game is in terms of audio. It's kind of like the dialogue, right? For a long time, I didn't know that this game was gonna have any dialogue in it, because David kind of like didn't express that for a while, because he didn't know if the game was gonna have dialogue. He was in the process of negotiation for a long time. So he finally did that, and then once he did, I needed to go in and restore all that dialogue because, sorry. They were very old recordings. They all sounded different from one another. And that was like a pretty big process. But it was probably one of the happiest weeks of my life. Because I kept hearing...
It's very important to understand not only the relativity...
I kept hearing
It's very important to understand not only the relativity of size and of time, but also of what there is. Now, as you know, the human senses respond only to a very small band of the known spectrum of vibrations.
So, he had, I think it was like 250 minutes of audio from Alan Watts that he condensed to like 150. And then he had like 5 minutes edits of that. And I told, David, we need to really condense that because that's way too much. And he wanted everything to be there because it's also beautiful. So that kind of like, he basically let me go ahead and edit it in however I wanted for content. And that was also very beautiful for me because it does deal with sound, but I had to do something that was more like a writer's perspective. So while I was doing cleaning up like this,
It's very important to understand not only the relativity of size.
You hear all that, crackling, and...
It's very important to understand not only... It's very important to understand not only the relativity of size.
So while I technically had to clean it up, I also, like, for content, I had to, like, take the best messages for it from it and keep them, right? All right, I think I'm going to pass it to Martin for a little bit, and then we'll come back to me. We'll come back.
Yeah, hello. I will talk about everything else, meaning that I will cover 3 games, and not only one. So I want us to start with first maybe who I am. My name is Martin Kvale, and I worked with a number of indie games as well as Eduardo. I haven't worked on everything, but I worked on quite a few games, which is some of them include iPhone games like Progress to 100 or arguably Hidden Folks. I worked on a horror game called Among the Sleep, which is basically where you play as a little baby, which I'm talking about right now. Award-winning gunner who did basically was working on with the same synthesizer he was showing off earlier. And then like Fugl, which you have already seen a few days ago here, as Johan was having a really good talk about it. Owlboy, Keyboard Sports, Force of Sleep with Ed Key, a little bit of Gentle Jousting, Tesla Grad, World to the West, and I was working with an Adventure Time episode at some point, which is really cool, and a really cool co-op game called Manual Samuel. So, firstly, before I go into designing horror sounds for you, I'll show you basically a bit how I think, because I work with a lot of games at the same time, usually like 5 to 6, sometimes 11. And I like to work experimentally. So that basically means that I have a technique after a while to work with several games which I call frames. I basically start working with a game, trying to figure out what is this game about. What do they want to do? Like with Hidden Folks, it's like a mouth-only game. So that basically means that the frames it's got to be mouth-only. Gunner, I only wanted to use a synthesizer that's like that synthesizer only. And it makes me able to kind of conceptualize and work really fast and experimentally. These are an example of frames I was finding while I was, So basically imagine like this is everything you can make with sound is in this picture. But these frames are like what I'm interested in, because these are the games. And suddenly I'll make a weird sound, which is kind of be like ending up by the Y in families. And I'm like, cool. That could actually work really well for the horror game. I'm going to just tweak it up here so it fits right in that little... Oh, that didn't work at all. I was going to see what that picture was for it, but I think it's like some kids. So yeah, this fits right in there with that kid, the hat that's wearing. See any other good? No. Nope. I think that's about it for frames. So, I worked on a game called Among the Sleep. It's basically a horror game where you play as a 2-year-old child. I'll see the quick thing with the trailer. Here. Oh yeah, I need to have that. Ah. Hello? Yeah.
My name is Teddy. Nice to meet you.
Good night, hon. Sweet dreams.
What is this place?
So yeah, that's basically like you play as a baby and you're 2 years old and your mom is missing. So you try to find her through this kind of weird escape that becomes stranger and stranger as the kid's imagination is taking over. And a lot of the sounds was basically me trying to figure out how does a kid wander around, like how does it relate to the world? Like, if you hear a vacuum cleaner or like a door squeaking, how can you you can't relate to knowing what it is because it's like a little baby doesn't understand that. And the game is also heavily centered around how a baby sees conflict between its mother and father, and then parents acting out, being drunk, whatsoever. So a lot of my design was basically trying to get that into the soundscape without being that clear about it. So I'm just going to show an example, and this is a very favorite thing I like to do, is bringing up baby crying sounds in front of a live audience, so that we will listen to that for 5 minutes while I live design it. I also added this for you, also you can kind of see some cool visual things, right? Alright, let's look at this. So my process is usually just trying to kind of see what I can do with different things, different effects. I like to kind of tweak things. So like right here, I'm just working with this little plugin that I like to do because I never quite know what it does. That's good. I like that. No, it'll be more. Yeah. I think this is becoming something nice here because sort of it retains some kind of thing of the crying. So I'm kind of at this point I'm like, I like this. I could definitely have it for a game like I'm going to sleep. And from this point it's just kind of keeping on kind of trying to see what else I can put in there. I actually like using a lot of plugins that come with the DAWG and DAW, like the digital audio workspace, which is like, it's free and it's usually, some of them are not that good, like these ones right here, but you can do a lot of cool things with them. They kind of mess up things and do things they're not intended to do. Let's just take like I got a new free plugin yesterday, so it's like a little plate reverb, but I just want to put that on at the end, so it kind of becomes a right now I'm just looking for frequencies that sticks out, and it's just kind of like not that nice. Maybe I'll do it like this. Yeah. And you can ride it a bit like. something like that. So yeah, that's one game. Eduardo, are you ready?
Yeah. Let's do it. All right, now that I got a little breather, I can be a tiny bit less nervous. Thank you, guys. So one of the first things I did when starting to work on this game was the ambience system. And for ambiences, like pretty much every level, every scale has like a different system working. Well, let's just go to the city right here, and I'll show you kind of like how the ambiences work. All right. Descend. No. There we go. Okay, so basically, how big you are as a thing, which is what we call the scale of the thing, determines what you hear. So when you're small and tiny, you kind of like hear all the little details of the place you live in. So here, I mean, this is just kind of like a big city. So I don't know, maybe we'll go to like a place that has little birds and stuff like that. Let's go to this green continent. Can we turn on the volume of the game a tiny bit? So, okay. So when you're tiny, you start to hear you hear the trees, you hear kind of like little details of the environment. But as you start growing, all of a sudden
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Because that sounds like in this audio illusion. What is it called again? Like the thing about the yeah. It's like the
Wait, say it again. The shepherd tone. Yeah.
basically like a never-ending ascending or descending tone.
Yeah, exactly. So you can loop it, and it'll keep pretty much going up or down.
Another game that has that actually is I think in Mario 64 when you're running up the stairs. It's like and it never stops going up. Piano, I think.
So yeah, so you hear the wind of like what it's like to be a huge thing, right? Then as you go down, you start to hear the detail of the water and everything. And so basically what we did was a slider where it kind of like would mix from one set of layers to another set of layers. So that was pretty simple. The thing was, you can also fly here. So that didn't actually work for every type of thing, because as you will see, all right, let's be a bird. Let's be a little condor. Now you may be a small creature, but you can go up in the clouds, right? And I still want you to hear the wind of the clouds and stuff. So we had to make two separate systems, one for things that were stuck in the ground and the other for things that were flying. But they basically work the same. It's just like one of the things we had to consider when it comes to these specific scales, because this only applies to the human scale, and it applies also to the landmass scale. So let's be, what is this? I want to be a boat. Let's be a boat. Let's be an old boat.
You can be a boat in this game. You can be everything.
So when you're tiny, you hear the waves, you still hear the open ocean, but as you start to grow, you only hear like just big wind. Oh, not yet. And actually, one of the things I do love about this landmass scale is flying around. And like seeing Johan's talk on fuel, that was all about flying. It reminded me of just flying around in the game, everything, but in a very different way. And I'll show you why in a second. Let's be a hotter balloon. So in this game, in difference or in contrast to fuel, there's no gravity. So I'm being used to flying in this game, and when I try to play fuel, I kept crashing into things because I didn't take into account that gravity actually worked. So now that I'm gonna play it again, I'll keep that in mind. Let's see, I think my favorite thing to be when I'm flying around is a biplane. As you can probably tell, everything in this game makes a sound. Everything sings in this game, and there's like over 3,000 things in this game. But of course, not everything needs a unique sound. But so in the end, I ended up making, I would say, over 600 unique things, and I just took forever. But I think it's worth it. And there's still like a lot of stuff that I would love to polish in this game. Alright, let's go here. Also, a quick side note, I think rocks are my favorite things to be in this game. I just love those sounds.
Eduardo, would you like to take a couple of questions?
Yes.
We're getting close
yes,
to time.
Sure.
I think Evan had one.
Actually, I was just waving at Wiley, but I did have a question that I came up with earlier, and I'm going to remember it now because I'm really good at remembering things. I recall one of the things you mentioned was that the sound design work you were doing, just because the scope was so great, you couldn't really get a feel for it until there was a lot there. And I guess something I'm curious about is if you did anything along the lines of like a mock-up or a field test as you were sort of trying to probe out that direction, or if you were mostly working within the game engine.
I was mostly working within the game engine. Usually what I do is I take videos of the games that I'm working on, and then I just design linearly. But this is a system-based game, so for some reason that wasn't really working. So I basically just had to make stuff and put it in game and get it to a point where there were enough stuff in there that I could actually get a sense for what it was going to sound like. And again, this is the type of game where it's the sum of all things that make it great, and not any one thing. You know, like, yeah, this is a rock, but it's not a particularly amazingly modeled rock. It's just a rock, right? And it's the sum of all these things that make this game impressive, or at least to me, right? And it works the same with the audio. It's like, you know, if you take one of the sound effects, it may not be that amazing, but when you consider all the things that have sound effects, that becomes a bit more cool.
I think we've got another question here.
Yeah.
We saw one of the sound effects, and I don't remember what it was for, that was in your DAW that was really closely chopped up. And it made me wonder about your like individual sound effect designing process. Like, to what degree, and I know this is going to be different for different sounds, are you like generating, you know, generating and designing a single sound that you capture for use in the game, versus like making some textural material and then actually designing the nitty gritty of the sound in the DAW? And is that different for software and hardware? when you're, using software versus hardware for sound generation?
Yeah, I would think that when it came to synthesizers, I would make a bunch of stuff without really looking at individual things. I would make like with this, I would just make a bunch of little cool sounds that were all within the same aesthetic. Same with the other levels, like the particle level, and then I would just start playing with it and see what sticks, basically. But when it comes to like things like in the human world, right, or in the landmass, where it's things that what they should sound like. So you don't do that as much, right? You design for specific things.
Got another question here.
Yeah. Also, like, how are we with time? Because I also want to make sure
We're running out, but we're trying to locate one of our panelists. So keep.
All right.
keep going.
We'll take one
I
more.
I also have 2 games to show.
Yeah. Like, I'll say one more thing after this question, and we'll let Martin do his thing.
I'll make it quick, and you can even say no to me. Are there any 2 sounds in here that are unobvious to the untrained ear that may have nothing to do with each other but are essentially similar that you wouldn't want to admit to us? Because you said you had about 3,000 things, but only maybe a fraction of the number of actual sounds.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't. Yes, there's a lot of things that share sounds, like cars, right? It's like there's 3 honking sounds for, I don't know, let's say 20 models. But I guess I don't care about if people recognize the same sound, because there's just too many things. It's like there's only so much I can actually do. So yeah, that's okay. You see, if sounds are repeated, that's fine. So the last thing I'll say, and I'll pass it on to Martin, is what I find really most interesting about this game is I don't consider this my best work. I don't consider, in terms of like the polish of it, in terms of, I've done stuff that was more polished and that to me just sounded cooler. This also wasn't my favorite game to work on because it was really hard. It took a lot of time, and it took a lot of effort. And like I said before, without feeling that victory, it was hard. But this is the game I love the most. This is the game I love playing the most. Like when I play this game, I feel good. I feel something that I don't feel with the other games that I've worked on. And I think that's something interesting to think about, that even though it was not the one I enjoyed the most and not the one I think is the best, technically speaking, it is still my favorite. And I don't know. I like thinking about that. So with that said, I will pass it on to Martin Kvale.
All right. Cool. Thanks, Eduardo. We might be running a bit short of time, so I'm at least going to try to cover Gunner. Hopefully, I get time for both Gunner and Fugl, as they're both cool. And I'm going to cover Gunner. One of the reasons why I want to cover it is because Gunner was probably one of my all-time favorite games to work on. Like, the process was really, really nice. I had a lot of time doing it, a fun time doing it, and it was really healthy. And the whole reason was like, I'm just going to start the thing in the background here. Let's see though. This is the game. Wait, I need to switch just a few things now. Actually, no, this is fine. So that's Gunner, basically. You're a small little blob and you jump around, and you can have different heads, you can shoot, you can hang out with Sally, which is your giant space whale friend. The only friend you have. And it's like a small kind of Binding of Isaac-ish shooter. Randomized worlds, that kind of stuff. And basically I started working on it because a friend of mine got really drunk, and he fell asleep after dinner. We were having dinner, and then we're going to do some drinking or something. And after that, I was kind of bummed out, and I was going home. I saw the game creator Ditto, who I knew a bit. He was working on this little weird cool thing that had generative tiles. And I just kind of texted him saying like, hey, I know what to do with this game. I'm just going to go home and make some sounds for you. And we started working on it like that. And I started working with sounds because I had this little synthesizer you see in front of me. Yeah. Do you all see good? Do you think this makes sense? Cool. And basically, I had bought it a while ago with a friend, and I wasn't happy with it. Like, I couldn't make music with it, and that's kind of why I bought it. And it didn't really work. It didn't really latch or something. And So I was getting impatient about. I didn't really know why I wanted this because it's super expensive and it looks like a toy and it was kind of impractical to have something which is just you don't ever use. So I decided to try using this one for exclusively for that little stupid game we were jamming on. So basically the whole sound of that game is me having fun with the OP1. I spent maybe 1 or 2 hours each month making sounds, and it would amount to around 100 or 200 sounds per time. So it was a really nice workflow as well, and I like that because then I would send Ditto, here's 100 sounds. I know you need 5, but a lot of these are really good. We should use them, right? So the sound started informing a lot of the animations and the game design, which is really interesting. And the process for making the thing itself is like you basically have different kind of sounds, right? I'm gonna try to you can modulate them. Yeah, that was already a little good ditty. So I would basically just say, start by recording and seeing sort of what I could make with. Maybe try some I wonder what this is.
Martin, is that a diagram of a cow's digestive tract on the screen of the OP1?
You're completely right. And it's just because it's cows have 4 stomachs, basically. So
I think that's perfect sense then.
And I mean, it's also a very fun thing to work with. This is this is a racing track, like an old. Okay, good. So yeah, this is basically me having fun with this. This is a phone. It's more like a filter, like a ring filter, and a spring reverb. Something like that, That would be like my process. And let's see out. So I have a loop, right? And I'd say at some point, now I'm looping it, and I'm saying okay, I'm just gonna record this while I'm playing it. Let me see what I can do with this. Pitch it up and down. Let's see now. Or can I pitch it up and down? Yeah. And I guess this, when I started rewinding it while I was recording it, that's kind of the sound of Gunner for me. Because you have, the sound you're on, and you sort of can scroll with it. And whenever I started doing, this little scrubbing thing, basically rewinding it, I'll add more cow. I have no idea where I'm at. Yeah, this is it. And I used to... yeah.
I don't want to disturb your bliss, but we're getting pretty close to time.
Shit. Yes. Okay, so that was the thing, right? And I would just stop this, and let's see now. Disk, and I would take it into my hello there, everybody. I would take it into my computer, and I would then just see what do we have here. It's not popping up. Actually, I pre-made something for you just in case of this eventuality happening. So let's see. This is a project I worked on after Gunner, which is basically called I Miss Gunner, because I really missed working with that. So the process for working with it's pretty similar to what you just heard. This is me scrubbing alongside a timeline. Something like that. yeah, you know. So basically, I was having a lot of fun with that, and just going in for per sound, I would go, oh, this is cool. What about this? Oh, this is cool. What about this? This is cool. What about this? So it enabled me to work on a lot of cool, make a lot of cool sounds in a very short amount of time. And basically, that sounds exactly like that. I would send him a bloop, 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 and it would just be in one sounds and say like, hey, just you do whatever, and he would do whatever, and I would comment comments, and that's pretty much the sound of Gunner. Is anyone having any questions for Among the Sleep or Gunner?
We have any final questions? What we're gonna do is we're gonna push up Blind Drive because one of our hardware panelists there was a mix-up with the time. So if the Blind Drive guys are here and ready, we'll move on next. Okay.
Mine's quick, I promise. So there was a synth that both of y'all mentioned for Goner and also for the Galaxy. Was that the OP1?
Yes, the OP1.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure.
I think what's cool about the OP1 is that it feels like a toy in terms of how you play with it. It doesn't sound like one. It sounds like really nice and professional, like a professional tool. But when you play with it, you feel like you're a kid. Like you're just messing around with knobs and making cool sounds.
Yeah, that was literally the cow filter you saw. I mean, every time I show people the cow filter, they go like, "Oh, what the fuck is it? Can I play with this?" You know. So it's a very easy synth because you don't get to. I mean, I think usually when you look at what I got up right now, this looks complicated and you know scary and stuff like that. It looks not fun. And this synthesizer is just it looks like fun. It feels like fun. So it's very low bar to start having fun and playing around with. So it was just. That's also a bit why it was such a fun experience because I was just playing around for a little bit. It's good. Yeah.
All right, let's get a warm round of applause for our guests, Martin and Eduardo.
Thank you.
Thank you.